Jake had never imagined that his life would change because of a single decision. He was a soldier, stationed on a remote planet at the edge of the galaxy. It was a lonely post, far from Earth and far from the excitement of battle. Most of the time, Jake kept to himself, focusing on his duty. That all changed the day he found her. It was a typical day on patrol when Jake stumbled upon something he hadn't expected. He had been walking through a forest of tall alien trees when he heard a strange sound, almost like a soft cry. He followed the noise until he came across an alien princess lying in the dirt, paralyzed and barely alive. She was from a species Jake had never seen before, with blue-green skin and large, elegant wings that were now bent awkwardly at her sides. Her face was pale, and her breathing was shallow. Jake didn't know what to do. He had only seen aliens like this in the distant reports, but he knew enough to recognize that this was a being of great importance. Her people would certainly come looking for her, but the question was, how long would that take? How long could she survive in such a state? He couldn't just leave her there. With his military training, Jake was used to making tough decisions quickly. He carefully approached the princess and checked her vitals. She was breathing, but her legs were completely paralyzed. He knew he couldn't carry her alone. He had no idea how far he would have to walk to find help, and time was not on his side. After a few moments of hesitation, Jake made the choice to act. He used his emergency communicator to call for backup, but the signal was weak. The storm in the atmosphere was blocking most of the communication channels. It was up to him. Jake decided to take her to the medical bay on his own. He picked her up gently, despite her tall frame, and carried her across the rough terrain. It was exhausting, but Jake didn't think twice. He'd never been one to shy away from a challenge. Hours later, he finally reached the base, his arms aching from the weight of the princess. He rushed her to the medical facility where he was met with concerned doctors. They were able to stabilize her, but the doctors couldn't do much more. They told Jake that the paralysis was the result of a severe injury to her spine, one that even their most advanced technology couldn't fix. Jake stayed by her side for days. He watched as the doctors worked tirelessly to help her, but there were no promises. Slowly, over time, she began to regain some of her strength, though her condition was still critical. Jake learned that her name was Lyra. She was the princess of the Zalarian people, a race known for their strength and beauty, but also for their mysterious ways. Her people had been exploring the galaxy for centuries, but Lyra's mission had gone terribly wrong. She had been left behind after an ambush, and her ship was destroyed in the attack. Alone and injured, she had wandered into the wilderness before collapsing. As the days passed, Lyra began to open up. She was quiet at first, but Jake's presence seemed to calm her. She often asked him questions about Earth, about the people, who lived there, and about what his life was like. She was fascinated by the idea of a planet so full of life, so different from her own world, despite the circumstances. Jake found himself drawn to Lyra. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. She had an elegance and grace that was almost otherworldly, even in her weakened state. And yet, she wasn't just a princess, she was a warrior at heart. Someone who had fought to survive despite everything stacked against her. One evening, as Lyra sat in a chair by the window looking out at the stars, she spoke softly to Jake. "I owe you my life," she said. Her voice was gentle but carried the weight of her gratitude. "You didn't have to save me. You could have left me there to die, but you didn't." Jake looked at her, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't like he had been trying to be a hero. He just couldn't stand the thought of leaving someone to suffer, especially someone as important as her. But hearing her say it out loud made him feel strange. He'd only done what anyone would have done in his place. "You don't need to thank me," Jake said, though he felt a warmth in his chest that he couldn't quite explain. It was the right thing to do? Lyra smiled weakly. "Perhaps. But not everyone would have done the same. I will never forget this." Over the next few weeks, Jake continued to care for Lyra, watching as she slowly regained strength. Her body, though still frail, seemed to be healing at an incredible rate. But the doctors told him it would be a long time before she would walk again. One day, Just as Jake was about to leave for a routine patrol, Lyra caught his hand. "When I recover, I will never forget you," she said. "You saved my life. My people will know your name." Jake smiled and gave a small nod, but in the back of his mind, he didn't truly expect to ever see her again. He figured that once she was healed, she would return to her people, and he would go back to his life on Earth. But as Lyra prepared to leave, something inside him changed. He found himself wanting to say more, to ask her to stay, but he held back. She was royalty, and he was just a soldier. The distance between them, both physical and social, felt too great, and then, as Lyra was about to board her ship, she turned to him one last time. "I will return, Jake," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "I promise you, I will return. And when I do, I will be whole again." Jake watched her ship disappear into the stars, wondering if he would ever see her again. He didn't expect that the next time their paths would cross, it would be under completely different circumstances. Weeks had passed since Lyra's arrival at the base, and Jake had become accustomed to her presence. He found himself looking forward to his visits, spending hours talking to her about everything and nothing. Despite the dire circumstances that had brought her to Earth, there was something calming about being around her. Her quiet strength and gentle nature had a way of making everything feel normal again, as if life could still be peaceful, even. In the chaos of the galaxy, Lyra had made steady progress. Her muscles had regained some of their strength, though she was still unable to walk. But every day, she seemed more determined. There was a fire in her eyes now, a quiet resolve that Jake admired. He had no idea how much longer she would need to recover, but he was certain that once she could stand on her own, she would be a force to be reckoned with. One evening, as Jake sat beside her, reading through some old mission reports, a soft beep from the communicator on his desk interrupted the silence. He glanced up, his brow furrowing as he stood and walked over to the device. "Who could that be?" muttered to himself. He pushed a button, and a message flickered to life on the screen. It was an emergency distress signal. The signal had come through a secure channel, one reserved for special requests. And the message sender was not a human, but an alien. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the name instantly. It was from Lyra's people. Lyra's voice, though faint and distorted, came through the speaker. "Jake, ... It's me, Lyra. I'm coming to see you. Need to speak with you." Jake's pulse quickened. He had expected this, in a way. He had always wondered if she would ever return to her people, and now it seemed like she had made the decision. But the urgency in her voice made him uneasy. Something was wrong. He quickly activated the communication system to respond. "Lyra, are you okay? What's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a long pause before she answered, the static crackling through the air. "I am healed, Jake. Fully healed. But things are ... complicated. I need your help, please." Jake's mind raced. Didn't know what to think. Part of him was relieved to hear that Lyra was well again, but another part of him felt uneasy. What could be so urgent that she needed to come all the way back to Earth? What had happened to her people since she left? "I'll be there as soon as I can," Jake said, trying to sound confident, even though his heart was pounding in his chest. "Just tell me where to meet you. The coordinates are attached to this message," Lyra replied. "I'll be there soon, Jake. Please don't worry." The transmission ended, leaving Jake standing alone in his office, staring at the blinking lights on the screen. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. Lyra was not the same person who had arrived on Earth, broken and alone. She was different now, stronger perhaps, but what kind of danger had she found herself in? With a deep breath, Jake gathered his gear and prepared for the journey. He wasn't sure where Lyra had gone or what had happened, but he knew that whatever it was, it wouldn't be easy. As a soldier, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts told him that Lyra needed him more than ever. A few hours later, Jake arrived at the coordinates Lyra had sent. It was a quiet, isolated spot on the edge of a rocky cliff, overlooking a vast, empty stretch of land. The moonlight bathed the area in a soft glow. But there was something unsettling about the stillness of the place. As Jake stepped out of his vehicle, he scanned the surroundings. He could hear the distant hum of an engine, and he knew she was close. His eyes narrowed as he saw a small ship descending slowly toward the ground, its sleek design shining in the moonlight. It was unlike any human-made ship he had ever seen. It's smooth, its metallic surface reflecting the stars above. The ship landed gracefully, its engines powering down. The hatch opened, and Lyra emerged, standing tall and confident. She was different. Now, her posture was no longer weak and fragile, but strong and regal. The wings that had once been broken and bent were now fully intact, their edges gleaming in the light. Her face was calm, her eyes steady as she walked toward him. Jake couldn't help but stare. She was no longer the princess he had once saved. She was something else now. A leader. A warrior. He wasn't sure if he could keep up with the person she had become. "Lyra," Jake said, his voice full of awe. You... You look amazing." Lyra smiled softly, but there was no time for small talk. She was here for a reason, and Jake could see the weight of it in her eyes. "I've changed, Jake, but there is much more to tell," she said, her voice serious. "The time has come for my people to take action, and I need your help." Jake raised an eyebrow, concerned. "What kind of action?" Lyra's gaze hardened. "My enemies are still out there, Jake, and they've only grown stronger, but they've made a mistake. They think I'm weak, that I'm no longer a threat. They're wrong." She paused, her eyes meeting Jake's. "And I need you by my side more than ever." Jake didn't hesitate. He knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Lyra. Together, they would face whatever threats the galaxy had to offer. Lyra's ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. As it touched down, its sleek silver surface glowed softly under the stars. A reminder of how far beyond human technology her people had traveled. He had known Lyra was special, but seeing the ship made him realize just how different her world was from his. She was no longer the fragile princess he had once saved. She was a leader, a powerful force in her own right. Jake stood still, watching as the ship's hatch slowly opened. He felt a mix of emotions swirling in his chest: excitement, fear, and something deeper, a sense of awe. The person who stepped out of that ship was not the same one who had arrived on Earth, injured and alone. Lyra had changed. She looked stronger, more confident, and yet, there was something familiar in the way she carried herself. "Jake," Lyra said, her voice calm and steady as she approached him. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The bond they had formed during her recovery was still there. Unbroken by time or distance, Lyra's appearance had changed in many ways. Her once fragile frame was now firm, her muscles toned from the training she had undergone since her recovery. The wings that had been broken and weak were now fully healed, their translucent edges shimmering in the moonlight. She stood taller than before, her posture regal and commanding. The alien princess Jake had carried to safety all those weeks ago was gone, replaced by someone new, someone who had found her strength and her purpose. "You look incredible," Jake said, his voice filled with admiration. He meant it. Lyra was more beautiful and powerful than he had imagined. Lyra gave him a small, knowing smile. "I've had time to heal, Jake, but there's much more I need to tell you." She motioned for him to follow her as she walked toward the base camp. Jake kept a few paces behind, still trying to take in the changes in her. He couldn't deny that he was both impressed and nervous. Whatever she had come for, it was important. She wouldn't have come all this way if it weren't, after I was healed. "I returned to my people," Lyra began, her voice soft but full of authority. "My enemies think I'm weak, that I am no longer a threat, but they don't understand what I've become, what I can do." Jake stayed quiet, letting her words sink in. He had seen her strength during her recovery, but hearing her speak like this made it clear that she had changed in ways he hadn't yet realized. "The Zalarian people are divided," she continued. "There are factions within my kingdom that want power for themselves, They've tried to use me to manipulate my position as a way to control the galaxy, but I will not let them. Jake nodded, understanding the seriousness in her voice. So what do you need from me? Lyra stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes met his, and there was a fire in them that Jake hadn't seen before. I need your help, Jake. You've seen what I can do, but there are things I cannot do alone. There are battles to be fought and alliances to be made. My people need to see that I am strong, that I am capable of leading them into the future. Swallowed, feeling a wave of uncertainty wash over him. I don't know much about alien politics, Lyra. I'm just a soldier. Lyra smiled at him, her expression softening. You are more than just a soldier, Jake. You've already shown me what true strength is. It's not in the weapons we carry or the armies we command. It's in the choices we make, in the way we help others. Jake felt a warmth spread through him at her words. He had always tried to do the right thing, but he hadn't realized until now just how much of an impact his actions had made on Lyra. She had seen something in him that he hadn't seen in himself. You've already helped me more than you. No, she said, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. And now I need you by my side again. Will you help me lead my people? Jake hesitated for only a moment. He had come to care for Lyra, and whatever the future held, he knew he couldn't leave her to face it alone. He trusted her, and he believed in her strength. She had already proven herself to him in so many ways. I'll help you, Lyra, Jake said, his voice steady. Whatever you need, I'm with you. Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was a quiet understanding between them. She had always known that her journey would be difficult, that the path ahead would be filled with challenges. But with Jake by her side, she felt more confident than ever that she could overcome whatever came her way. Thank you, Jake, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Together, we will change everything. For a moment, looking out over the base camp, the stars above seemed brighter than ever, and Jake couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of something bigger. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Lyra was no longer the broken princess he had once saved. She would lead her people to a new future as they walked back to the camp. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face something much larger than either of them had imagined. But he was ready. For Lyra, for her people, and for himself, he was ready to face whatever came next. Jake and Lyra spent the next few days planning, discussing, and strategizing. Jake had never been part of a royal mission before, let alone one that involved an entire alien race. But Lyra was clear about what needed to be done. She had returned to Earth for a reason, and it was a reason that went beyond personal gratitude or even their growing friendship. Lyra's people were in trouble. There were factions within her kingdom that sought to exploit the weakness of her people. They wanted to control the galaxy, and they were willing to do anything to gain that power. After everything Lyra had been through, she knew she couldn't do it alone. I need to show them that I'm not just the princess they thought I was. I'm stronger now, Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. And with your help, we can make them understand that. Jake sat across from her in the small camp they had set up near the base. His mind raced with the weight of the situation. He had always followed orders, never questioning them. But this was different. She was asking for him to stand by her side, to become part of her fight for her people's future. I don't know if I'm the right person for this, Jake said honestly, though he knew his words didn't reflect his true feelings. He had already made up his mind. There was no way he would leave her to do this alone. But doubt lingered in his mind. Lyra met his gaze with unwavering confidence. You are exactly what I need, Jake. It's not about military strength or power. It's about doing what's right, even when the odds are stacked against us. Jake nodded, his heart heavy but resolute. Was right. He had seen her strength, her ability to lead, and the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a princess. She was a leader. Someone who could bring change to her people. And he would be by her side every step of the way. That evening, after their discussions had settled down, Lyra led Jake to a secluded area near the edge of the camp. A small glowing device in her hand illuminated the night. It was shaped like a crystal, smooth and radiant, pulsing softly with light. "What's that?" Jake asked, his curiosity piqued. "This," Lyra said, holding the crystal up to the light, "is a gift I want to give you. It's a symbol of trust, and it's much more than just a simple token." Jake frowned, his mind struggling to understand. "A symbol of trust? What does it do?" Lyra smiled, the faintest of glows reflecting in her eyes. "It's a piece of my people's advanced technology, a technology that, if used properly, can help humanity in ways you can't even imagine. It's a key to unlocking what you could call ... the future." Jake's confusion grew. "Are you saying this thing can help Earth? Can help me?" "Not just you, Jake. It can help everyone. See, my people have developed technology that goes beyond what you've seen. We've unlocked secrets of the universe, ways to harness energy, heal the sick, protect ourselves from harm," Lyra explained. "And I'm offering it to you, to Earth, as a way to forge an alliance, to ensure your people have the knowledge and resources to protect themselves in the future." Jake was silent for a long moment, processing her words. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The technology of an alien race, a race that had explored the farthest reaches of the galaxy, was now in his hands. And with it, the potential to change everything for humanity. He took the crystal from her hands, his fingers gently brushing against hers. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Keep it safe," Lyra said, her voice serious. "Must not fall into the wrong hands. There are those who would use it for destruction, for control. We must be careful." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. "I'll protect it, Lyra. I promise." She smiled, relieved to hear the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you, Jake. This gift, it's more than just a piece of technology. It's the future, and now it's in your hands." They stood there for a moment, the quiet of the night surrounding them. Jake could feel the power of the crystal, but more than that, he could feel the trust Lyra had placed in him. She was not just asking him to protect this technology, she was asking him to protect her people's future. "We're in this together," Jake Lyra said softly, looking up at the stars. "And with this, we'll be able to show my people that we can change the course of our destiny." Jake looked up at the sky too, the weight of the situation settling in. He didn't fully understand the depth of what was ahead, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't walking away. Not now, not ever. The path ahead would be difficult. There were enemies, dangers, and challenges that they hadn't even begun to face. But as Jake stood there, holding the crystal, he felt a sense of purpose he had never felt before. He was ready for whatever came next. Lyra's hand rested on his shoulder, and for a moment there was a quiet understanding between them. They were no longer just two people thrown together by chance. They were allies, partners in something much bigger than themselves. "We'll make it through this together," Lyra said, her voice full of conviction. Jake smiled, the weight of the moment settling into his chest. He didn't know what the future held, but with Lyra by his side and the power of the crystal in his hands, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days that followed Lyra's return to Earth were filled with planning, discussions, and preparations. Jake stood by her side, helping her as they worked together to build a strategy. The future of Lyra's people, the future of Earth, on their shoulders. The alien technology Lyra had given Jake was powerful, but it was also a target for those who wanted to use it for their own gain. As Lyra explained more about the factions within her kingdom, Jake realized just how dangerous the situation had become. There were enemies within the Zalarian people, powerful leaders and warlords who would stop at nothing to control the galaxy. They had already tried to use Lyra's status for their own purposes, but now, with her healed and stronger than ever, they saw her as a threat. "They believe that because I was once weak. They can control me," Lyra said one evening, as they sat in her makeshift command center, a small tent just outside the base. Her face was serious, her eyes narrowed as she spoke. "But I've proven myself. And now they want to silence me." Jake could see the pain in her eyes. She had been through so much already, and now she was facing a new battle, one that would take everything she had. but he could also see the strength in her. Lyra wasn't the same princess he had carried to safety. She had become a leader, someone who was ready to fight for her people. "What's the next move?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though inside his heart was racing. He had never been in a situation like this before, and the weight of it was beginning to settle on him. Lyra stood up, pacing for a moment as she gathered her thoughts. "We need to gather allies, Jake. We need to show my people that there's a new way forward. But we can't do it alone. We need Earth's help, and I need you by my side to make that happen." Jake nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I'm with you, Lyra. Whatever it takes." Just as they were about to begin making their next move, a communication signal interrupted their plans. The message was urgent and came from one of Lyra's trusted advisors, a Zalarian military commander named Ares. The message flickered on. The screen and Lyra's face turned pale as she read the contents. "It's happening sooner than I expected," she whispered to herself, her voice filled with fear. She turned to Jake. "Ares reports that a coup is underway. My enemies have already started to make their move. They've seized control of the capital city." Jake's heart sank. This wasn't just a political disagreement anymore. It was a full-scale battle for power, and Lyra was at the center of it. She was the symbol of the old ways, the way of peace and unity. And her enemies were determined to destroy everything she had worked for. "They won't stop until they have complete control," Lyra said, her voice shaking with emotion. "They want to erase everything I stand for, and they will destroy anyone who stands in their way." Jake didn't hesitate. "We can't let that happen. We have to stop them." Lyra nodded, wiping away a tear. "But I need to act quickly. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to save my people." Jake stood up, determined. "Then let's act now." They quickly gathered the few allies they had within the camp, preparing for the journey to Zalarian space.
Zalarian space?
Ready? And Jake felt a sense of urgency as they boarded. The crew was small, but loyal people, who believed in Lyra's vision for the future and who were willing to fight alongside her. As the ship lifted off the ground, Jake looked out the window. At the planet below, Earth was peaceful, a quiet home to billions of people, but that peace was fragile. It had only taken one message from Lyra to send him into action, to remind him that the galaxy was much bigger than Earth. There were dangers out there, real dangers and humanity, to be ready for them. The journey to Zalarian space was long, but Jake didn't mind. His thoughts were focused on the task at hand. He would need to move quickly, gather support, and show the galaxy that Lyra wasn't alone. With the power of the alien technology, they had the chance to change everything. But as they approached the capital, something strange happened. The ship's sensors began to flicker, and the communication signals started to scramble. Jake and Lyra exchanged worried glances as the ship shook violently. "What's happening?" Jake asked, his voice tense. "It's a trap," Lyra whispered. "They knew we were coming." Suddenly, the ship's warning systems blared as enemy ships appeared out of nowhere, surrounding them. There were dozens of them, Solarian warships, ships that Lyra's enemies had used to block her at every turn. They had anticipated her move, and now they had her cornered. "We're surrounded," Jake said, looking out at the sea of enemy ships. "We need to get out of here, now." Lyra's face was hard with determination. "No, we're going to fight." Jake looked at her, confused. "What? We can't take them all on. It's suicide." Lyra's eyes never left the view of the ships. "I won't run. Not again. My people need to see that I will fight for them, no matter the cost." Jake realized in that moment how far Lyra had come. She had become a warrior, not just a princess. She was willing to risk everything for her people's future. And Jake wasn't going to let her face it alone. "We're in this together," Jake said firmly, his hand gripping the controls. "Let's show them what we're made of." For that, they braced themselves for the battle ahead. The odds were stacked against them. But Jake knew they had something the enemy didn't: unity, purpose, and the will to fight. Together, they would face the threat from the shadows and fight for a future where peace, not power, would reign. The battle was fierce. Jake gripped the controls of the ship as it shook with each blast from the enemy warships surrounding them. The Zalarian fleet had closed in from all directions, their weapons powered up and ready to strike. Lyra stood beside him, her face hard with resolve. She had insisted they fight, and now, with the stakes higher than ever, she was proving that her strength was not just in her words but in her actions. "We can't let them win," she said, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "I won't let them take everything we've worked for." Jake could see the fire in her eyes. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for her people, for the future they both believed in. He knew she wasn't going to back down, not even when the odds seemed impossible. He wasn't going to leave her side. Lyra's voice rang out across the comms, ordering the crew to fire back. The ship rocked as their weapons systems responded, launching bursts of energy at the enemy fleet. Jake could hear the sounds of the battle outside, the explosions echoing in the distance. The ship's shields were holding, but not for long. The enemy was relentless. "We need to break through, or we won't make it," Jake said, his voice filled with tension as he adjusted the ship's course. He glanced at Lyra, who was watching the battle unfold with a calmness that both amazed and terrified him. Lyra nodded. "I know. We have the element of surprise on our side."
They don't.
"No, we have the crystal's technology yet. But we can't keep up this fight for long." Suddenly, the ship's sensors blared a warning. Jake's eyes widened as he saw a larger enemy ship break through the formation and charge toward them. It was the flagship, the one that had been leading the attack. Lyra's enemies had thrown everything they had at her. "This is it," Jake muttered. "We need to stop that ship, or we're done for." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "I've faced worse. We'll make it through this." Jake felt the weight of her words. Lyra had been through so much already, and she had never once given up. Her strength was incredible, and he admired her more than ever. He couldn't let her face this alone, not after everything they had been through. With a determined breath, Jake pushed the ship forward, aiming directly for the flagship. He activated the ship's emergency engines, pushing it to its limits. The ship shook violently as they broke through the enemy lines, dodging fire from the surrounding warships. But the flagship was still closing in, its weapons locking onto their position. Jake gritted his teeth, his hands firm on the controls. "Hold on," he shouted to the crew. "We're going straight through." Lyra's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Do it, Jake. I believe in you." The ship accelerated, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. Jake felt his heart racing as he focused on the massive enemy flagship ahead. The enemy was relentless, but Jake had something they didn't. Two reasons to fight, a reason to win. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for Lyra and the future of both their worlds. As they neared the flagship, Jake made his move, activated the ship's most powerful weapon, a last-ditch effort that they had kept hidden. The energy beam shot forward, cutting through the air like a jagged lightning bolt. The enemy flagship's shields flickered, struggling to hold under the pressure. Jake could see the vulnerability in their defenses. The moment of truth had come. With a final surge of power, Jake aimed for the flagship's core. The weapon fired, and the ship shuddered with the impact. The enemy flagship was torn apart in a brilliant explosion, the shockwave sending the surrounding warships into disarray. The battlefield fell silent for a moment, as if the entire galaxy had paused to witness the event. Jake exhaled, his grip on the controls loosening as the threat of the flagship vanished. "We did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. But Lyra's expression remained focused, her eyes scanning the remaining enemy ships. "It's not over yet," she said. "There are still battles to fight, Jake, but this was a victory." Jake nodded, understanding her words. The fight wasn't over, but they had just won a major battle. The enemy was now in disarray, and their advantage had shifted. It was a turning point, but it was only the beginning, as the remaining enemy ships began to retreat. Lyra looked over at Jake, her face filled with a mixture of relief and pride. "We've shown them, Jake," she said softly.
What?
"We've shown them that we're not afraid." Jake met her gaze, and in that moment, he knew that Lyra was right. They had fought for something bigger than themselves, and they had won. It wasn't just a victory in battle. It was a victory for their people, for their future. We've only just begun, Jake said, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. But we're ready for whatever comes next. Lyra smiled back at him, the weight of the battle lifting from her shoulders. Together, we can do anything. As the ship sailed through the stars, the future seemed a little brighter. There was still much to do and many challenges ahead. But Jake and Lyra were no longer just allies. They were partners, united by their shared goal of building a better future. Whatever came next, they would face it together.